Drop a comment if you've ever felt the earth shift beneath you while the world kept turning, like you're the only one who noticed everything changed. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm of the heart monitor pulled me from a depth I wasn't supposed to return from yet, not according to the anesthesiologist who had counted backward from 10 with practiced reassurance, his voice following me down into darkness. 7, 6, 5. I wasn't supposed to be awake. Not yet. 4 hours of spinal reconstruction. That was the plan. Dr. Sahana had been clear. When you wake up, Theo, it'll all be over. You won't feel a thing until then. But here I was, consciousness seeping in like water through cracked stone, the ceiling tiles above me swimming in and out of focus. My throat felt scraped raw from the intubation tube they'd removed. My mouth tasted of copper and chemicals. And then there was the peculiar weight in my right hand. My phone. How was my phone still in my hand? Had someone placed it there after surgery? No, I remembered now. I'd been clutching it when they wheeled me in, scrolling through emails, sending one last message to Miles about the Henderson account. Dr. Sahana had laughed softly. "The phone stays outside, Mr. Marin," she'd said. But I'd mumbled something about needing it, about Camille possibly calling, and they'd relented. A small thing, a harmless eccentricity of the nervous patient about to go under the knife. The phone buzzed in my palm, once, twice. The sensation seemed distant, as though happening to someone else's hand. I tried to lift my arm, but my muscles refused the command. The anesthesia still had me in its grip from the neck down. Only my consciousness had broken free, floating to the surface while my body remained anchored in chemical stillness. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. With tremendous effort, I tilted my head sideways and brought my hand into view. The screen glowed with a notification. Citibank alert. Transfer completed. $312,000 from joint savings to external account Meridian Trust number 7729. Authorized by Camille Marin. Time 9:43 a.m. My brain, still clouded with anesthesia, struggled to process what I was seeing. Numbers jumbled together, then separated. The amount crystallized first. $312,000. Nearly everything in our joint savings. The account we'd opened together on our 3rd anniversary, when we promised each other we'd save for a place in Carmel, where the fog rolls in every morning and the cypress trees bend like old men contemplating the sea. "This isn't right," I whispered to the empty room. I blinked hard, certain this was some drug-induced hallucination. The screen dimmed, then went dark. I pressed my thumb against it with trembling effort, and it illuminated again. Same notification, same amount, same name, Camille Marin. My wife, Meridian Trust. The name meant nothing to me. We had accounts at City National and Chase, investment portfolios with Fidelity, but no Meridian Trust. "Mistake," I mumbled, my tongue thick in my mouth. A fraud alert, perhaps. Someone had hacked our account. I needed to call the bank, to call Camille. I tried to sit up and was rewarded with a bolt of pain that arced from my lower spine through my shoulders. The surgery. Dr. Sahana had fused 3 vertebrae, repairing damage from a fall I'd taken 2 years ago on a ski trip to Tahoe. A fall I'd taken because I was distracted, watching Camille laughing with the ski instructor instead of paying attention to the slope. With clumsy fingers, I navigated to my contacts and found Miles's name. Miles Brennan, my friend since our Stanford days, now my financial advisor, and the person who'd know what to do about this apparent banking error. I managed to send a text that felt coherent in my mind, but appeared on screen as a jumble of half-formed words. Mills. Bank. LRT. 312,000 out of jaunt account. Camille. Help. The phone slipped from my grasp and fell onto the blanket covering my chest. The effort had exhausted me, but panic kept me conscious. A cold stone lodged beneath my ribs. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the pinholes in the acoustic tiles, while fragments of memory began to float like debris in the currents of my mind. Camille at dinner 3 weeks ago, her eyes downcast when I suggested we book a trip for our anniversary in August. "I'm not sure about August," she'd said, her finger tracing the rim of her wine glass. "The boutique expansion might need my attention." The boutique, her passion project for the past 2 years. A curated space in Venice Beach selling French and Italian home goods, overpriced ceramics and linens that wealthy Westsiders couldn't resist. She'd partnered with Jasper Lang, a brand consultant with slicked-back hair and a geometric watch that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Jasper thinks we could open a second location by fall," she'd mentioned casually a month ago. "There's a space in Silver Lake." I'd nodded and smiled because that's what I always did when Camille spoke of her dreams. I nurtured them like tender plants, never questioning whether they would bear fruit. That was our unspoken arrangement. I provided the stable ground, and she brought the color. I was the earth, she was the sky. But lately, the sky had been distant, cold, clouded. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Miles. I fumbled to answer, raising the phone to my ear with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Theo? Jesus, are you okay? What's going on? I just saw your text." Miles's voice was sharp with concern. "Miles," I managed, my voice a rasp. "The bank. Alert." "Yeah, your text was kind of a mess. What's happening? Aren't you supposed to be in surgery right now?" "Woke up," I said. "Phone in my hand. Got alert. Camille transferred money. All of it." There was a long pause, then the sound of Miles typing. "Hold on, I'm logging into your account now," he said. "You gave me access last year, remember?" "For tax planning." I remembered. Camille had been irritated about that. Why does Miles need to see all our finances? But had relented when I explained it was more efficient than emailing statements back and forth. More typing, then a sharp intake of breath. "Theo," Miles said, his voice deliberately calm now. "The transfer is real. It went through 20 minutes ago, to an account at Meridian Trust. That's an offshore bank, primarily Cayman Islands." The cold stone beneath my ribs expanded, pressing against my lungs. "No," I said. "Has to be fraud." "It's not fraud, Theo. It was authorized with Camille's credentials and security questions. And—" he hesitated. "This isn't the first withdrawal. There have been smaller transfers over the past 3 months. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, all to the same account." The room seemed to tilt around me. The beeping of the heart monitor accelerated. "Where's Camille now?" Miles asked. "Don't know," I muttered. "Supposed to pick me up after surgery." "You need to call the police, Theo. This is theft." "No," I said with sudden force. "No police. Not yet. Need to talk to her first." Miles sighed. "Theo, listen to me. She's running. She knew you'd be unconscious. She planned this for today specifically. If you wait—" The door to my room opened, and Dr. Sahana Desai entered, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression shifting from clinical routine to surprise when she saw I was conscious. "Mr. Marin," she said, approaching the bed. "You're awake much earlier than expected. How are you feeling?" I stared at her, unable to form words that would make sense of what was happening inside me. "Miles," I whispered into the phone. "I'll call you back." I ended the call before he could protest. Dr. Sahana was checking my vitals, her movements efficient, but gentle. "Your heart rate is elevated," she observed, glancing at the monitor. "Are you in pain?" Was I in pain? Yes, but not the kind she meant, not the kind her skilled hands could diagnose or repair. My wife, I managed. Need to contact my wife. Dr. Sahana nodded. Of course, Mrs. Marin was here earlier, just before your surgery. She said she'd return this afternoon to take you home. But you're not going anywhere today, Mr. Marin. Your early awakening doesn't change the recovery protocol. Camille had been here, before the surgery, before the transfer. Had she looked at me, sedated and vulnerable, and gone through with it anyway? I remembered our last vacation, Santorini, 6 months ago. We'd watched the sunset from our hotel balcony, the Aegean Sea glittering below. I'd reached for her hand, and she'd let me take it. But there'd been a detachment in her eyes, as if she were already somewhere else, looking at a different horizon. Something's wrong, I told Dr. Sahana, my voice cracked and desperate. My wife took our money, all of it. I hadn't meant to say it. The words slipped out, carried on waves of anesthesia and shock. Dr. Sahana's expression shifted from professional concern to something deeper, a flash of genuine empathy that made her look suddenly very human. Mr. Marin, she said softly, you're still under the influence of powerful drugs. Sometimes they can cause confusion or unusual thoughts. No, I insisted, trying to show her my phone. Look, bank alert. She hesitated, then took the phone from my trembling hand. Her eyes scanned the screen, and I watched as her professional detachment wavered. I see, she said finally, returning the phone to me. And this is unexpected behavior from your wife? A laugh escaped me, high and strange. You could say that? Dr. Sahana checked my IV drip, adjusted something, then looked down at me with quiet intensity. Mr. Marin, Theo, I'm going to increase your pain medication slightly. You need to rest now. Whatever this situation is, it can be addressed when you're more stable. I wanted to protest, to demand my phone back, to call Camille and ask her what the hell was happening. But the additional medication was already seeping into my bloodstream, softening the edges of my panic. Wait, I murmured. Please. Dr. Sahana paused at the door. If my wife comes, I said, fighting to keep my eyes open, don't tell her. I know. Something in Dr. Sahana's expression solidified, a decision made. She nodded once, firmly. Rest now, Mr. Marin. As the door closed behind her, I felt myself drifting again, but not into peaceful darkness. I was falling into memories, into moments I'd overlooked or misinterpreted. Camille's late nights at the boutique, her new passwords on her laptop and phone, her suggestion that we keep our finances separate for tax purposes, and Jasper Lang, his hand on Camille's elbow at the gallery opening last month, the way she'd leaned into him, just slightly, when she laughed at something he said. There must be an explanation, I whispered to the empty room. There has to be. The monitor continued its rhythmic beeping, but now it sounded like a countdown. To what? I wasn't sure. The end of my marriage? The death of everything I thought I knew? As consciousness slipped away, one clear thought remained. When I awoke again, nothing would be the same. The life I'd built with Camille, 7 years of mornings and evenings, of shared dreams and quiet compromises, was dissolving like sugar in hot water, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue. The last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me was the weight of my phone in my hand, the device that had delivered the truth I'd been too blind to see, too loyal to imagine. I drifted away on a tide of pharmaceutical mercy, my grandfather's voice echoing from childhood. The worst pain, Theo, isn't what breaks you. It's what you never saw coming. I returned to consciousness more gently the second time, the foggy veil of anesthesia lifting like morning mist. My mouth was desert dry, and the ceiling above had stopped its nauseating swim. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Each pulse a reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still existing in a world that had tilted on its axis while I slept. The phone lay on my chest where it had fallen. I lifted it with steadier hands, checking the time. 3:47 p.m. I'd been out for nearly 5 hours since my conversation with Miles, since the moment I'd learned that my wife had emptied our joint account while I lay unconscious, my spine freshly reconstructed, my trust intact but fracturing. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting ladder-like shadows across the institutional blue blanket covering my legs. I pressed the call button beside my bed, then scrolled through my notifications. 3 missed calls from Miles, 1 text from Camille. Surgery should be done by now. Meeting with a vendor until 5. Will come after. Rest well. C. So casual, so normal. As if she hadn't just transferred $312,000 to an offshore account, as if she weren't planning to vanish from my life like morning dew under a harsh sun. The nurse who entered, Jenny, according to her name tag, checked my vitals and retrieved my overnight bag when I asked for my phone charger. Doctor, Desai left instructions to notify her when you woke up, she said. She also said you might want to call someone, a Mr. Brennan. So Dr. Sahana had taken my situation seriously. She'd made arrangements. The realization brought a wave of gratitude that momentarily displaced my dread. I plugged in my phone and called Miles. Theo, Jesus Christ, I've been worried sick. How are you feeling? His voice was tight with concern. Better, I said. Clearer. What have you found out? Miles sighed heavily. It's not good. I've been digging into your accounts all day. The big transfer wasn't the first. Over the past 3 months, Camille has moved nearly $85,000 in smaller amounts, always just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic notification. The pain in my spine flared, but it was nothing compared to the hollowness expanding in my chest. And there's more, Miles continued. I checked the business accounts for her boutique. There have been unusual transfers there too. Large sums to consultants and vendors with vague invoices. One name keeps coming up, Horizon Ventures LLC. Jasper, I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. What? Jasper Lang, her business partner. Horizon Ventures is probably his company. A brief silence as Miles processed this. The guy with the stupid hair and the watches. Look, Theo, it looks like they've been planning this for months. The boutique expansion might have been a cover to move funds around. I closed my eyes, remembering the night Camille had first mentioned Jasper's name. We'd been at dinner with friends, and she'd spoken of him with such animation, her hands gesturing in the air, her eyes bright with excitement. He just gets it, she'd said. He understands exactly what the boutique could be. Had it started then? That night? 2 years ago? Or had it been building even before that? A slow erosion of whatever had once bound us together. I've already put a freeze on all your remaining accounts, Miles was saying, and I've contacted our friend at City National. They're looking into whether the transfer can be reversed, but honestly, if it's already in the Caymans. We need proof, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Evidence that this was deliberate, not some misunderstanding. I'm bringing everything I've found so far. Bank statements, transaction logs, the works. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Theo? I think we should involve the police. This is grand theft. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar pinhole pattern. Let's wait until I talk to her, I said. Maybe there's an explanation? Miles cut in, his tone gentler than his words. Theo, you know there isn't. Not one that makes this okay. He was right. I knew he was right. But some part of me, the part that had watched Camille sleep beside me for 7 years, The part that knew the exact sound of her laugh when she was truly happy. That part couldn't reconcile the woman I'd married with someone capable of this calculated betrayal. A soft knock at the door preceded Dr. Sahana's entrance. She looked tired, her surgical scrubs exchanged for a neat blouse and slacks, her hair still bound in its professional bun. "Mr. Marin," she said, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better than before," I said. "More present." She nodded, checking my vitals. "Your friend Mr. Brennan called the nurses' station. He explained the situation. I want you to know that I've spoken with hospital security." I raised an eyebrow, questioning. "Standard procedure," she assured me. "When a patient is in a vulnerable situation, we take precautions. Your wife will be allowed to visit, but security has been notified to monitor the situation discreetly." The care in her voice, the quiet professionalism that somehow managed to convey human concern without overstepping, it nearly broke me. I turned my face away, afraid I might cry in front of this woman who had seen inside my body, but was still essentially a stranger. "Thank you," I managed. Dr. Sahana hesitated, then sat in the chair beside my bed. "Mr. Marin, Theo, I don't typically involve myself in my patients' personal affairs, but I've also never had a patient discover something like this while still in recovery from major surgery." She leaned forward slightly. "If there's anything I can do—" I met her eyes, dark and intelligent behind rimless glasses. "You said Camille was here earlier today, before the surgery. Do you remember what time?" Dr. Sahana considered this. "Around 7:30 a.m. She spoke with me briefly about the procedure, then spent some time with you before we took you to the OR. Would there be records of her coming and going? Security footage, maybe?" Understanding dawned in her expression. "You want proof that she was here when the transfer was made?" I nodded. "I can inquire," she said carefully. "The main entrance and front desk are monitored. But Theo—" She paused, choosing her words with precision. "Are you sure you want to go down this road? Law enforcement involvement, legal procedures, it's added stress while you're trying to heal physically." It was a fair question. Did I want justice, retribution, or did I simply want to understand how something I'd believed in so completely could disintegrate without my noticing? "I need to know," I said finally, "even if it hurts. Maybe especially if it hurts." As if summoned by our conversation, there was another knock at the door, and Miles strode in, a leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder, his face tight with concern. Once Dr. Sahana excused herself, Miles pulled the visitor's chair closer and began unpacking files from his bag. "How bad is it?" I asked. Miles's expression was grim. "It's not good. She's been methodical, Theo. The big transfer today was just the final move." He spread printouts across the bed, bank statements, transaction records, account summaries, a paper trail of betrayal laid out in columns and figures. "Look here," he said, pointing to a series of withdrawals. "These started about 9 months ago. Small at first, then increasing. Always just under the notification threshold." I stared at the dates, trying to correlate them with memories. 9 months ago. October. We'd been planning a weekend in Big Sur. Camille had cancelled at the last minute. Something about the boutique's inventory system crashing. "And here," Miles continued, showing me another document. "Transfers from the boutique's business account to Horizon Ventures LLC. Consulting fees, according to the memo line." I remembered Camille's growing distraction over the past year, her late nights at the boutique, the way she'd pull away when I touched her, not dramatically, but subtly, a gradual increase in the physical space between us until we were sleeping on opposite sides of our king-sized bed, an ocean of Egyptian cotton between her body and mine. "There's more," Miles said, his voice softer now. "I found flight confirmations. 2 one-way tickets to Paris, departing tomorrow morning, in the names of Camille Larocque and Jasper Lang." Larocque. Her maiden name. The name she'd been so reluctant to give up when we married. "I've built a reputation with this name," she'd argued. I'd convinced her to take mine anyway, suggesting a compromise. She could use Larocque professionally, Moran personally. She'd agreed, but now I wondered if she'd ever truly accepted becoming part of my life, rather than simply passing through it. "Have you told anyone else about this?" I asked. Miles hesitated. "I mentioned it to an old law school friend, Aria Valdez. She works financial crimes for LAPD now." I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "You called the police." "Not officially," Miles clarified quickly. "Just got some advice. Aria said given the amount and the evidence of planning, this could definitely be prosecuted. But you'd need to file a formal complaint." As we spoke, a nurse entered to administer my pain medication. When we were alone again, the medication already beginning to soften the edges of my discomfort, I found myself drifting back through memories of Camille. Not the recent ones, clouded with distance and distraction, but earlier ones. Camille laughing in a summer dress, her hair catching the light. Camille intensely focused, sketching designs for her boutique at our kitchen table. Camille on our wedding day, her eyes meeting mine with what I'd believed was absolute certainty. Had it all been a performance? Or had something genuine twisted slowly into resentment, then calculation, then betrayal? "There was a moment," I said softly, the words floating out of me on a current of painkillers and grief. "About 6 months ago, we were at the gardener's anniversary party. Camille was wearing this silver dress that caught the light when she moved. I was watching her from across the room, and she didn't know I could see her. She was standing alone by the window, and she had this expression on her face." "What kind of expression?" Miles prompted gently. "Like she was looking at something very far away, something she wanted desperately but couldn't reach. And then she noticed me watching, and it vanished. She smiled and came over, but that look, I've seen it before. In photos of my mother, before she left my father." Miles was silent, letting me navigate the painful realization that had been forming in my subconscious for months, maybe years. "She's been leaving me for a long time," I said finally. "Today was just the day she actually did it." Before Miles could respond, there was a knock at the door, and Dr. Sahana returned, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize. She was slender and composed, dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her dark hair cut in a practical bob. "Mr. Marin," Dr. Sahana said, "this is Detective Aria Valdez. She'd like to speak with you if you're feeling up to it." So this was Miles's law school friend. I glanced at him, saw the mixture of apology and resolve in his expression, and realized he'd made this decision for me. Perhaps he'd seen what I was only now beginning to accept, that there was no version of this story with a happy ending, that the only path forward was through the painful truth, not around it. "Come in, detective," I said, pushing myself up slightly against the pillows. "I think I have something to tell you." Detective Valdez approached with measured steps, professional but not cold. "Mr. Marin," she said, her voice carrying a subtle warmth beneath its authority. "I understand you're in a difficult situation. If you're willing, I'd like to take your statement about the unauthorized transfers from your accounts." The word hung in the air between us. Unauthorized. Such a clinical term for the dissolution of 7 years of trust. "What happens after I give my statement?" I asked. "We'll open an investigation," she said simply. "Gather evidence, interview witnesses, attempt to locate the funds. Given the timing and the flight information, we would need to move quickly." "You mean you'd arrest her?" The words felt strange in my mouth. Detective Valdez met my gaze directly. If the evidence supports it, yes. Wire fraud of this magnitude is a serious offense, Mr. Marin, especially with evidence of premeditation. I looked down at my hands, at the wedding band still circling my left ring finger. I'd never taken it off, not once in 7 years. Detective, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I'll give you my statement, but I want you to know something first. I'm not doing this for revenge. I just want... I paused, searching for the right word. I just want... resolution. I want to understand what happened, what I missed. Detective Valdez nodded, a flash of something like respect crossing her features. Understanding is often the hardest part, Mr. Marin, but it's also the most important. As she began taking my statement, Doctor, Sahana returned with a tablet in her hands. I have the security footage you asked about, she said quietly. From the main entrance, time-stamped 7:43 a.m., and again at 9:47 a.m. She placed the tablet on my lap, and I pressed play, watching as Camille entered the hospital, her posture perfect as always, her face composed. 4 minutes after the last timestamp, the funds had been transferred. She'd come back to check on me. No, to make sure I was still unconscious, before finishing what she'd started. The evidence was irrefutable. The betrayal complete. Are you okay? Dr. Sahana asked, retrieving the tablet. I looked up at the 3 faces surrounding my bed. Miles, fierce in his loyalty. Detective Valdez, determined in her pursuit of justice. Dr. Sahana, compassionate in her unexpected support. 3 strangers who had become my allies in this strange, painful awakening. No, I answered honestly, but I think I will be. Night had fallen by the time Detective Valdez finished taking my statement. The hospital room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of monitoring equipment and a small lamp in the corner. Miles had stepped out to take a call, and Dr. Sahana had been called to another patient, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the steady beep of the heart monitor, a sound that had become strangely comforting in its constancy. I stared out the window at the lights of Santa Monica, wondering where Camille was at this exact moment. Packing, perhaps, making final arrangements with Jasper. Had she planned to visit me one last time before disappearing forever? A farewell she thought I wouldn't remember, a goodbye whispered to an unconscious man. The door opened quietly, and Dr. Sahana slipped back into the room. Detective Valdez asked me to let you know they've stationed an officer near the entrance. If your wife comes, as she said she would. She let the sentence hang unfinished in the air between us. Thank you, I said, my voice rough with exhaustion. For everything. She adjusted my IV line, her movements precise and gentle. You should rest, Theo. Tomorrow will be challenging enough physically without adding emotional strain. But rest seemed impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Camille's face, not as it had been recently, distant and preoccupied, but as it was when we first met, vibrant, curious, full of possibilities. The woman who had looked at me across a crowded gallery opening and smiled with such unexpected warmth that I'd forgotten the question I was about to ask her. Dr. Sahana, I said as she turned to leave, have you ever had a patient wake up during surgery? She paused, considering the question. It's rare, but it happens. Usually they don't remember it afterward. But sometimes they do. She nodded. Sometimes. Why do you ask? I gestured vaguely toward my phone. If I hadn't woken up early, if I hadn't seen that notification, she would have been gone by the time I was fully conscious again. I would have woken up to an empty room and a drained account. I met her eyes. Is that better or worse than this? Dr. Sahana returned to my bedside, her expression thoughtful. In medicine, We believe knowing is always better than not knowing, even when the knowledge brings pain. At least with knowledge, healing can begin. As she spoke, my phone buzzed with a text message. Camille, running late. Will be there by 8:30. Need anything? So casual. So normal. As if she weren't planning to board a plane to Paris tomorrow morning with another man and my life savings. She's still coming, I said, showing Dr. Sahana the message. Dr. Sahana nodded. I'll inform Detective Valdez. She hesitated. Do you want to see her? You don't have to. Did I? Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to see her face when she realized her plan had failed. But another part, the part that had loved her completely for 7 years, recoiled at the thought of watching her being led away in handcuffs. I don't know, I admitted. Dr. Sahana squeezed my hand briefly. You have time to decide. But as it turned out, I didn't need to make that decision. At 8:27 p.m., the quiet of my room was broken by a commotion in the hallway. Muffled voices, then a woman's voice rising in protest, followed by the unmistakable sound of Miranda rights being read. I pushed myself up in bed, ignoring the flare of pain in my back, and moved to the window that overlooked the hospital's main entrance. There, illuminated by security lights, I watched as Detective Valdez escorted Camille to a waiting police car. Even from this distance, I could see the rigid set of Camille's shoulders, the practiced composure with which she held herself. No screaming, no struggle. Just a quiet acquiescence that somehow hurt more than any dramatic scene could have. She looked up once, her eyes scanning the windows of the hospital as if she could sense me watching. For a moment, just a moment, I thought our eyes met across the distance. Then, Detective Valdez opened the car door, and Camille ducked inside, disappearing from view. It was the quietest goodbye imaginable. No words, no confrontation. Just a woman I'd once built my life around being driven away into the night, leaving behind the hollow shell of our marriage. The door opened, and Miles entered, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and concern. They got her, he said unnecessarily. Valdez was waiting in the lobby when she arrived. She had her passport in her purse, Theo, and a one-way ticket to Paris for tomorrow morning. I nodded, still looking out the window at the now empty space where the police car had been. And Jasper? They're picking him up now, at his apartment in Venice. I returned to my bed, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline that had sustained me throughout the day finally ebbing away. What happens now? Miles sat beside me, his voice gentler. She'll be arraigned tomorrow. Bail will be set, though given the flight risk, it'll be substantial. Then, well, she'll either plead out or go to trial. Either way, they'll freeze the accounts, try to recover the money. Money. It seemed so insignificant now. Yes, it was a fortune, our savings, our future, the tangible expression of years of work and planning. But sitting here in this hospital room, my body broken and healing, my marriage shattered beyond repair, the money felt like the least of what I'd lost. Did she say anything? I asked. When they arrested her? Miles shook his head. Not according to Valdez. She just asked for her lawyer. Of course she did. Camille had always been practical, composed. Even in betrayal, she maintained her dignity. Later, after Miles had gone home with promises to return in the morning, Dr. Sahana came by on her final rounds. You should be proud of yourself, she said, checking my vitals one last time. Not many people would handle this situation with such grace. Grace? Was that what this hollow feeling was? This strange, detached calm that had settled over me like a shroud? I don't feel graceful, I admitted. I feel empty. Dr. Sahana nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's normal. The body protects itself from trauma, physical or emotional, by shutting down non-essential functions. But the emptiness won't last forever. After she left, I lay in the darkness, listening to the rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor and the occasional footsteps of nurses in the hallway. Against all odds, sleep began to steal over me, the combination of surgery, medication, and emotional exhaustion finally taking its toll. Before I surrendered to unconsciousness, I reached for my phone one last time. I opened a new message to Camille, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. What could I possibly say to the woman who had shared my bed, my name, my life for 7 years, only to disappear with such calculated precision? In the end, I wrote only 3 words. I saw you. I didn't send it. Instead, I deleted the draft and set the phone aside. Some goodbyes are better left unsaid, some wounds better left to heal in silence. As sleep claimed me, I realized that Dr. Sahana had been right. Knowing was better than not knowing, even when the knowledge brought pain. At least now I could begin to heal, not just my spine, carefully reconstructed by skilled surgical hands, but my heart as well, broken but still beating, still marking time in the quiet darkness of the hospital room. Beep, beep, beep.